Hello, my name is Stevie Lee McGregor, and today I'm going to be taking a couple moments to talk to you about queer parenting in Canada and how the children of queer parents are feeling from their own perspective. The reading that I had in the starting of my presentation today is an overview about the paper written by Rachel Epstein, Queer Parenting in Canada, Looking Backwards, Looking Forward. In Rachel Epstein's paper, she discusses a wide array of failures and successes within queer parenting today. Queer parents have a long-lasting history of fighting for their rights to be parents, and although we have come a very far way from where we started, we are still a long way from equality. As explained in this paper, many queer parents feel as though they must hide a part of themselves to become heteronormative in order to keep their children. We are showing a shift to our social and political climate where LGBTQ+ parents can claim both their rights as parents and their sexual identity at the same time, but it's been a very long road. For example, Epstein reports that still in 2008, PEI still had it not possible for non-biological parents to illegally adopt their children through second parent adoption. There is a long history of queer parents fighting for their rights to parent. In the 1980s, there was the lesbian boom, which was an era and time where lesbians who wanted to become mothers were finding their own ways of getting pregnant without the government or doctor's support, and they were supporting each other in the process. Although queer parenting always existed, it wasn't really noticed until the late 1970s and early 1980s. This is when it became visible to Canada. It wasn't until 2005 that same-sex marriages were legal in Canada. When this paper was written, international adoption was not possible for LGBTQ+ Canadians. However, it is possible now, but it is not as likely to happen as we'll talk about later in this presentation. So where are we now? So many queer parents still struggle today with their identity interfering with them becoming a parent. The queer parents that have the easiest time with adoption in court today are the parents who closely resemble the heterosexual couples and a heteronormative lifestyle. When queer parents find themselves in court, many claim they often feel as though they're fighting to prove that they are just as good as straight people and parents. Many bisexual parents decide to hide their identity in court in fear that it will interfere with the judge's decision. To add some unique insight to this presentation, I decided to look at what it is like to live in a household run by queer parents from the child's perspective. I wanted to do this in the least biased way possible, as there is a lot of controversy on this topic, and no matter what I type into Google, I'm going to see what I want and hear due to confirmation bias. In saying this, I decided to only look at papers and videos written by people raised by queer parents themselves. You may be asking yourself, what exactly is a queer spawn? Both queer spawn and culturally queer are terms used to define the experiences of children who live under queer parents or have queer parents. Right before we jump into what the children or past children are saying, I wanted to just take a bit more time to talk about the assigned paper and what Rachel Epstein says. Epstein states that children of lesbian families are less likely than their peers to be abused by parents or caregivers. Female children are more likely than their peers to engage in some same-sex sexual behavior and identify as bisexual if they grew up with queer parents. This article also states that queer spawns are not the ones statistically that are getting in trouble at school, running away, throwing tantrums, or trying drugs. They're often the ones that are adoring their parents. Maya Newell, daughter of queer parents, talks about how many queer children are not as happy as you may think they are, but not because their parents are causing their unhappiness. This comes from the social construction that is negatively affecting their queer parents. Maya talks about how her parents recreated children's books when she was younger to have queer parents in them so she didn't feel weird or left out. Her parents wanted her to feel like her family was normal regardless of what society says. She also talks a lot about the pressures that children of queer parents have and feel about being a poster child, which is a common theme within my research of how children of queer parents feel. The pressures that children of queer parents feel is referred to as the poster child syndrome. This is when the child feels as though they have to act and feel perfect all the time so that their parents will not be unfit parents and they won't be taken away from them. These children often feel so much pressure that they often feel like they have no one to talk to and that they must be the poster child all the time, which means the perfect child. This is most of the reason why the nonprofit organization called Collage was created, to give education and support to children and adults who have queer parents. Many children claim when interviewed that Collage gave them a safe place to discuss their families without judgment. I will now talk to you about Natalie Perry's perspective of growing up with queer parents. I think it's important to look at many different child's perspectives to get a good overview and an inside look of what is really happening. Natalie Perry explains to her interviewer that she had a hard experience with her family members and how her extended family did not accept her queer parents and how she felt that burden on herself and she felt like her and her parents never felt accepted. She also explains that queer spawns like herself often feel alone and that they're in this middle spot as they don't feel quite heteronormative, but they're also not queer like their parents, so they're just stuck in this middle place. Natalie also talks about when she moved out of home that she really actually missed being part of the LGBTQ plus community, but that she just wished that she wasn't forced into it during childhood because her parents were queer. Now I'm going to take a couple moments to read you some direct words and quotes from queer spawns themselves. Gabrielle Heerman said, "It took a very long time to be able to say out loud that my mom was gay. She never met anyone with the same-sex parents. I went through a hard time, but I got connected with Collage and found a community of people who shared the same experiences as me." Another direct quote from Zach from Iowa says, "I think the operative word in describing our family is not LGBTQ+, but it's in family. If you look at the vast majority of things that define who my moms are or who my family is, it's really no more accurate to say that my moms are gay married than to say they're Packers fan married or work in healthcare married. They're both just as accurate in describing who my moms are." And the last quote that I will give you guys from McKenna says, People would always ask me, what are they like? What is it like?" And I'm like, they're just people. They don't have claws or rainbows and flannel hangings in our house. We don't have a U-Haul in the back. We're actually just very boring in some ways. So in saying all that, I would like to wrap up my presentation with you guys and put it all together. So at the beginning of this presentation, we talked about Rachel Epstein's Moving Backwards, Moving Forwards paper, which talked about queer parenting in Canada and how it's had very many successes but also many failures. We also talked about how one of the big problems with how we view queer parenting today is that it's socially constructed and viewed as being bad. Then we took a very in-depth look of how the queer parents' children were feeling. I really didn't want to discourse them, so I wanted to look at their own perspectives. When I did research, I found that many papers had one extreme or the other, so I wanted to find articles and papers and podcasts that talked to the children of queer parents themselves so that I didn't get it wrong. I hope that this presentation gave you some insight about not only queer parenting, but queer response themselves. I hope you enjoyed my presentation. Thank you.